Archon Valeria stood trembling before the man whose family she had incinerated. In the heavy silence of the throne room, she waited for the strike, the scream, or the cold steel of a blade against her throat. Instead, Elias Thorne simply held out a hand, offering a path to peace that felt heavier than any weapon. How do you explain the concept of hatred to a child who has only ever known how to love the stars? Before we see how the Archon answers, join us for more chronicles of the human spirit. Now, we return to the moment the Solis shuttle first breached the atmosphere. The coffee in Elias's thermos had still been warm then, 6 hours before he stood in the center of the glass palace. He sat in the vibrating hold of a battered shuttle, his fingers tracing the rough texture of a photograph. In his mind, he could still hear the rhythmic creak of a rusted backyard swing set, a sound that usually meant his daughter Lyra was laughing. Now, that sound was just a ghost, a mechanical heartbeat in a house that no longer existed. Beneath the observation deck, the hegemony's capital shimmered like a fractured diamond. Kale, the chronicler, watched from the high balcony as the human soldier disembarked. The man looked small. His uniform was a drab, oil-stained gray that stood in offensive contrast to the iridescent armor of the Luminan guards. As Elias walked, the guards didn't just block his path. They loomed. Their translucent wings flared in a display of biological dominance. One guard let out a trilling laugh, a sound like glass bells as he gestured to the soot on Elias's boots. The soldier didn't look up. He didn't flinch. He simply kept walking toward the throne room, his steps heavy with a gravity the Luminans had long ago forgotten. Inside the great hall, the Archon sat upon a seat carved from a single fallen star. She was ancient, her skin glowing with a soft, bioluminescent hum that signaled her absolute calm. Beside her, Legate Drax manipulated a series of flickering holograms. They were records of human history, a curated gallery of fire and failure. He showed the great hunger of 2090. He showed the scorched plains of the Martian secession. "You are a species of combustion," Drax's voice echoed, cold and resonant. "You burn everything you touch, including yourselves. Why should the hegemony allow such a nuisance to continue existing on our borders?" Which meant the diplomacy had already failed before it began. Kale noted the way Elias's jaw remained set. The human didn't argue the facts. He didn't defend the wars or the hunger. He stood in the center of the polished floor, a plain man with no medals, facing a woman who ruled 1,000 suns. "We do burn," Elias said, his voice surprisingly quiet. "But fire isn't just for destruction, Archon. It's how we signal for help when we're lost in the dark. Are you finding a flicker of hope in this soldier's stand? Subscribe to see if the Archon chooses the fire or the signal." Archon Valerius leaned forward, her light pulsing a rhythmic, predatory gold. She found the human's lack of fear irritating. It was an anomaly in her calculations. To her, power was a matter of mathematics. The hegemony had the ships, the longevity, and the light. Humanity had only their fragile, fleeting years. "Your persistence is a biological error," the Archon stated. "Legate Drax has already authorized the final solution for the Solis colonies. It is mercy, really. To end a cycle of suffering, you are too stubborn to break yourselves." Elias looked at her then, truly looked at her, and for the first time Kale saw the Archon's light flicker. It wasn't a look of defiance. It was a look of profound, agonizing pity. Archon Valerius had spent centuries studying the physics of power, but she had never learned to calculate the weight of a ghost. She stood in the silence of her private chambers, the bioluminescent glow of her skin dimmed to a bruised, flickering purple. Behind her, Kale remained in the shadows, his data stylus hovering. He watched the way her hands trembled as she scanned the classified casualty files Elias Thorne had refused to mention. The truth lived in a data stream from 3 years ago. It was a routine bombardment of a low-value agricultural sector on Earth. One name stood out in the lists of the vaporized Lyra Thorne. Archon Valerius turned toward the human. He hadn't followed her for revenge. He hadn't even brought a sidearm. He simply stood by the tall window, looking out at the luminant stars as if they were just distant lanterns. "I ordered that strike," Valerius whispered, her voice cracking like dry parchment. "I signed the mandate that turned your Oakhaven into a graveyard. Why are you standing there? Why haven't you tried to kill me?" Elias didn't turn around immediately. He watched a Luminan scout ship streak across the dark, a needle of light stitching the void. "Because I promised her I wouldn't," he said. The words were small, but they filled the room. "Lyra used to look at the sky and tell me that the stars didn't belong to any one side. She thought if we just met you, we'd see that everyone is just trying to stay warm in the dark. If I kill you, I kill the last thing she believed in." And now, back in the tribunal hall, under the silence of 300 species, the Archon found her voice. She didn't look at her council, or the snarling legate Drax. She looked only at the man in the charcoal-stained uniform. The outcome wasn't decided by a fleet, but by a confession. Valerius stepped down from her star-carved throne, an act of such profound structural heresy that the guards actually lowered their spears in shock. She reached out and took the human's hand. "Your daughter was right," the Archon said, her voice amplified to every corner of the hegemony. "We have been cold for a long time." The treaty wasn't signed with ink, but with a shared silence that paralyzed the warmongers in the room. Legate Drax's holograms of war flickered and died, replaced by the simple, terrifying reality of a peace that required more courage than any invasion. 2 months later, the air in Oakhaven still tasted of old ash and new rain. Elias knelt in the dirt of his backyard, the silence of the ruins no longer heavy, but expectant. He held a small canister of oil and a rag. With slow, deliberate motions, he worked the rusted chains of the backyard swing set. The metal groaned, then shifted, the orange flakes of decay falling away to reveal the sturdy steel beneath. He pushed the seed gently, watching it rhythmically cut through the air. Beside the swing, a Luminan ghost lily, a gift from a reformed Archon, opened its pale petals, thriving in the Terran soil. The swing moved back and forth, a steady, peaceful pulse in the garden. The world is changing, and Elias Thorne is finally home. What promise would you keep, even if it cost you everything? We'll be here tomorrow with another story from the edge of the galaxy.